And welcome back. We're gonna think about painting this guy this time. Checking my battery charge, looks pretty good. First thing we're gonna do when we start off is I like to put refined linseed oil. This refined linseed oil works a little differently than the boiled linseed oil, which to me looks a little orangey. This looks a little more yellowy, has more of a skin color. So what I'm going to do, I get this stuff from a specialized place, our little art store here in town, and I'm just going to use a little bit. I don't need much, but I'm going to put this all over anywhere there's going to be skin tones. Got to hang on to it to paint it, don't I? And I don't worry about getting too perfect about where it all goes, but I get enough to cover the skin. I'm just going to cover back behind the ears, front of the face, and if I slop it over on something else, well, it'll be alright. I even do it in the eyeballs. Because what I really want to do, and I see a couple of areas right here where I've got some marker where I drew on it when I was painting it, when I was carving it rather. So I'll have to come back and take those off here in a little bit. That's not a big deal. I just run my knife over that, take those couple of little marks. But I want to make sure it gets all over the skin, down in these holes, down in these areas, back of the neck, front of the neck, all that. Yep, another little spot right there I got to cut off. And then eventually I'm going to come back in, I'm going to paint the face up a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I want that to soak in, and I like the way that color works out. I like the way it looks, and so I'm going to take let me use a gouge here. We'll just take a little bit of that off. Just want to take off those marks because they'll end up as dirty parts. And I don't want a narrower tool. And another one right there we'll take off. And one more, where'd I see that? Back here. Sometimes you get in a hurry and don't pay attention to what you're doing. I got one little black spot right up there, mark. And I believe we got them all off. At least I hope we did. We'll find out when we go to paint the whole doggone thing whether we got them all off or not. But I don't see any more. There's a little bitty one right here. I think otherwise he looks pretty good. Go back and touch up those spots. Don't need much, but just a little bit. And we'll let him sit there without painting his face for a while. I want that to soak in, probably a good half hour before we get back to it. Hopefully, maybe sooner. We'll see. This refined linseed oil was something I learned from my friend Ryan Olson. We were talking about boiled linseed oil and how we just about got away from it, but the art people talked to us about this and said, well, why don't you try this? And this is a little more expensive. I think this is probably somewhere around $10 a bottle, but I've had it for several months and I haven't used much of it, so I like it. The brand is Gamblin, Gamblin, refined linseed oil. So if you want to give that a shot, I would suggest you do that. A little bit later, I'm going to color his face. I'm going to start with flesh tone, and I'm using these Americana Deco art paints. And then I'm going to come back with a little bit of dark flesh. This is a new bottle for me. I'll have to shake it up quite a bit. And then I'll add just a little bit of tomato red or Santa red just to get that color. But I want to work on the hat right now. We've got a hat we're going to work on. When you plan these things out, you got to plan what your colors are going to look like. At least have it in the back of your mind what you want to do. And I want to give this guy kind of a gentlemanly gray color. This is Delta Creative Ceram Coat. And I like this gray because it just gives him like he's, it's his good hat. He's going to town with it. And one of the things you got to worry about with this acrylic paint is you got to really shake it up. I don't know about you. I don't like seeing, I do like seeing the wood grain. And I'm going to leave just enough of that in here so that you can tell it's wood grain. And I'm going to put that in my palette here. Hopefully you can see that palette. Rain Gray is the color I'm using on this one. And I like that color. It's just it's a good solid gray color. And I'm gonna really water it down. I'm almost filling up that well with water. So I've got the well, I got the paint. I'm looking for the one brush that I always use to mix paints with, and I can't. There it is. Okay, I'm going to mix this up pretty well because I want it well done. I'm not going to dip it in water. You can if you want. I've done that in the past, and I've not done it in the past. It just depends. On this one, I've got it watered down quite a bit. And so I think by the time I get to painting, we'll find out here in just a minute whether it's going to work for me or not, and whether I've got to water it down some more. Let's see what that looks like on that back. A little thick. I want it a little thinner than that, so I'm just gonna put some water in there because it's a little bit heavier than I want it. So now I'm gonna move some of that paint over here, and I'm gonna water it down again. I had about half that amount of water that I added to start with, and so you can see the difference in the water, maybe a little bit more. And then I can refill this one from here as I need to. Let's see what that looks like. That looks a little better. A little more gray. And I'm watered it down quite a bit, so I'm just gonna go around here with a medium-sized round brush. I've used this in a lot of times, and it works. I always get that question about what brushes to buy, and I go, the one that works, because I don't know a better way to say it. In other words, whatever brush you can do. When I painted, I used to paint watercolor and acrylics, and I'm looking forward to going back to it eventually when I have time to do both carving and painting. But I'm going to tell you the same thing that every painting instructor will tell you. And it follows the same philosophy here in carving. Use the biggest tool you got for the job. Because if I'm painting and I want to paint large pieces of my art, whatever I'm doing, I don't want a brush that has 3 hairs and some air on it, as Bob Ross used to say. I want a brush that's got some teeth to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint just like I carve with the biggest tool I can. So when I'm carving, if I've got have a little booger right there I need to get out. If I have a 2-inch blade that I'm carving with, I want to use that 2-inch blade as much as I can for a couple of different reasons. One, it's a matter of time. I don't want to piddle and play with that carving with a tiny little tool. Yeah, it may get into some places that I can't get into with a bigger tool, but it's also going to be very difficult for you to get a lot done with that in a timely fashion. And if you're interested in, you got a time frame you got to match. You got to make sure that your time isn't eaten up with something that could be taken up with something bigger. And so when I go to paint, it's the same philosophy. I want to paint with the biggest brush for as long as I can, and then eventually switch to a smaller brush with the finer detail on it, so that I can add those colors on the eyes and whatever. But I want to use a big brush, and this isn't by any means a big brush. This is a fairly good sized brush, but I mean I might have been able to paint it faster if I'd have gotten a bigger brush, but this one's working. So it's big enough for what I'm doing, and it's detailed enough or pointed enough at the front that I can get back in here without worrying about coloring the ear. I can get in there, color around that ear with that brush. And so, as I've said before, watching somebody paint can seem like watching corn grow. If you've ever sat out in the field and watched corn grow, you know how things don't change. It looks the same over and over and over. Getting down to my well here. I'm going to come in here and get a little bit more. Dip it over there. Add some more water to it. I don't need a lot to it, but I need enough to float that paint. I know a lot of people will water that carving down with water, and I've done that on some. I don't hardly do that much anymore because I water my paint down. I can control that a little bit more. Once that water gets in that carving, I have a hard time figuring out when it's dry enough, when it's wet enough. So I like to run that control through my brush and through my carving. So you can see, you go back here and you'll see there's little spots you left everywhere. There's another one right there. I'll get into him. But this is like when you're painting a picture. This is your undercoating. There's going to be another couple of coats that go on top of this in terms of the color of the paint and in terms of distressing it. We're going to add some highlight dark and highlight lights as well. Because what we want to make sure is, while he may look like his Sunday go to meeting hat, one he only wears when he goes into town, I need to carve off that little piece of paint I slopped over on the hat band because it's not going to be a gray. And I might be able to cover it up, but it might not, and it'll show if I don't. So we'll just carve that off. Come back in here with a little bit more paint, and we're just carving it in gray. Can't remember what I was saying. Oh, I was talking about distressing the hat. So we're going to come in here and we're going to add some highlights. Pick up our missing spots there. Add some highlights and make this thing look like, not like it's flat. You don't want, okay, maybe you do. I don't. I don't want flat colors on my carvings. I want them to pop because, as I've been saying all along in the last few videos I've been doing, it's all about details. It's all about the details. And the more details you put on a carving, the more it catches someone's interest. And if you're a carver that's going to sell, we all want to make enough money to pay for our hobby. But if you're a carver that's going to sell or give away gifts, the one thing that people want is to be captured by what you're doing. So I got a fairly gray hat. Look here. It's so thin. Can you see those? Maybe you can. I hope you can in the picture. Look at those grains running through here. We still see some wood grain running in here. I'll get it as close as I can. I don't know if it's picking it up because I'm not seeing the picture very well. But you see wood grain all the way through here when you're painting it. That's because you left your paint so thin that it colors it, but it also leaves this wood grain here. And I don't care how much they try to recreate that in China or somewhere else. This wood grain on the upper side and on the bottom shows up. And you just can't recreate that in resin. It's showing up as part of what you want to show on your carving. So take a good minute to look over it. If you don't want to wait, go ahead and start painting another part of it. But I'm gonna move on to that hat band. And I want something a little brown. I don't want it real brown, or real dark brown. I don't want it. You guess what I'm saying is I don't want it this color. Although that wouldn't be bad. I think a little darker would be better. There's all kinds of different browns you can get. This is dark chocolate. You can use raw umber. Let's see if I've got a raw umber laying over here. No, not to hand. I don't have a raw umber, but this is going to work because we're going to water that down again. This is that Americana Deco Art. I don't need much of this because I'm going to shake it up first because I want to get that paint and that medium separated or joined together. So I don't need much brown because I'm going to water this down quite a bit, and some of that's going to bleed into the hat looking like sweat stains. And so we go back to our mixing brush. And if you don't like the tint of that, just add a little more paint. Make it thinner. And if you really want it to be a different color, you can go back with a little bit of white and add in there. Grabbing another small brush. This is more of a square end than a round end, but I don't even know what this is. This one is a Artist Loft that says 2. I don't know what 2 is supposed to mean, but let's test that color. Yep, that looks good. When that soaks in, it's gonna be what I want. So I'm gonna start right in one corner, and again, I don't want to splash it everywhere because I've got wet paint in the gray, but I do want a little bit of color in there. I don't need a lot. So I'm gonna paint that down in those cracks and crevices. And if you don't like the color, and if you don't like the hue of it, the value, go back and do it again. So when you come back after it's dry, you can add more paint in there, and you can get it darker. This again is one of those details you're working on, trying to get better at your carving. This is what you're doing in terms of the details, both on the body of that hat band and around the edges. I was loading videos yesterday, and I was watching a video by a guy named Eric Georges. Anybody ever sees him, he does a series of videos called A Craftsman's Legacy. I think that's what it's called. He's got a whole lot of videos about carving and woodworking and ceramics and all kinds of artistry that people are doing. He's been around the country. They let him play around with it. But I watched one yesterday of him getting a hat made for himself from a guy in Texas, and I thought that was pretty good. It's interesting to see how hats are made from somebody who's been doing that for quite some time. What else I can do here, take a little bit of that, water it down quite a bit, and come back and do a little bit of color out here on the edge. You don't need much. You're just giving it the hint of a sweat band a little bit, sweat stain. Add a little bit more in there. And you don't need much. You're just getting that detail. You want more details on here. Once you carve your carving and you start getting some of those details, that's where you start to get people picking it up somewhere, whether you're doing a show or art talk, a demo. Our club does a lot of demos around the valley. We do it at the fair, we do it at the libraries, sometimes we do it at local stores. But you're just adding a little bit of sweat band here, sweat stain here, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that underneath. And I can make that darker and darker and darker. I don't have to add a whole lot, but I'm just adding a little bit here, because right there where the crown and the brim come together, you might want just a little bit of color. Not sure if that's showing up well. I know I'm not seeing much of it yet, but I've only added one coat. I did a demo for a class this year, 2021, back in August. And one of the things the class asked for was, can you do a demo on how you paint? And we batted around some ideas on what they wanted me to show them, and finally we decided, since I was pretty good at cowboys, we'd do that. We'd do a cowboy head. And it was surprising to people to see that sometimes on a face you've got 3, 4, 5 coats of color. Sometimes on something you want to emphasize, you've got 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 coats of color. There's nothing wrong with that, because that just shows your attention to detail, and it shows you're building up rather than one color or one shade, one hue, one value. You're showing that you're taking the time to really put those extra details in on your carving. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going around until I think I get the color that I'm looking for on that sweat stain. I don't need much, but I need some. It doesn't show up until you get it in the light, but you've got now a few colors. Now let's put a couple on the top too, because that sweatband just isn't on the bottom. Sweat stains won't just show up on the bottom. This will allow you to get in here, and wherever you've missed a spot, you can come back in here with a little bit more. Fill in those spots you missed. Get that color down to where you want it. That's what we're looking for, underneath and on top. Now I'm going to take this same color and I'm going to use that, being a little bit frugal, I'm going to use that to undercut to color the hair. Try it on the back just to make sure that's the color we want, it's the thickness we want. Yeah, that looks good. I'll color the hair. This keeps you from having to spend a lot more time mixing a lot of color. Bunch of different colors you may not need, and using the same palette. The problem with using the same palette is sometimes these colors can all blend together. If you're using the shirt and the pant and the hat and the hair and everything all the same color, then it becomes, okay, how do you separate one from the other? And so you got to be careful with that. That's where, again, I'll show you those details that come in, because we got this color on his hat band. We got this color on his hair. We're going to have this color on his sideburns, although I might want it a little bit darker, so I'll dip down in there until I get more of that stuff out of there, color out of the bottom. This is really watered down paint, so if you don't want watered down paint on the hair, just go back in here to your color. You've got color in the lid, and I'm going to mix a little bit more up here with this color I already got. Thins it down a little bit, so if you want it darker than that, this is thicker paint. And we've colored that hair a little bit better, a little bit more noticeable rather. I don't know that it's better, but at least it's more noticeable. And I've got some right there on the eyebrows. We'll make that thicker too. Use that thicker paint under there. Eyebrows are one of those things where they could easily get away from you. I got a little mark right there that I don't want. I'm just going to use a UV tool to get in there and take those two little, look like black freckles. I didn't want them in there. So, there we go. There we go. So at this point, I like the way he's starting to look. I like his hair. I'll add a little bit more color back here, another coat, just to get a deeper shade to hit those spots up under those ears and back under that hat where I want. And I think we'll let him sit there for a second. I'm going to turn on the air conditioner, I'm going to turn on the fan so you can see what I'm doing. But here we've got color on every spot of his hair. We got that. We got color on his eyebrows. We got color at the back of the hair. Color at the sideburns. We've added color to the hat. We're going to do a little bit more a little bit later. add some details. Anyway, I'm gonna pop that air conditioner in, so probably 10 or 15 seconds. It'll be noisy, so turn the sound down if you want to, but I just want to warm it. I just want to dry everything up. Here goes. And there we go. Just dries him up a little bit, brings out some of that color, gets him to where we want him to go. I'm now going to mix up some color on the face because I'm going to mix a little bit of flesh. And I don't have a big face to worry about, so I don't need a lot of paint, but I got to get it out of that tube. So we're only doing a little bit of color in there. I didn't realize this was a brand new jar, so I got to cut it open. Give me a second or two. Maybe I'll get it open today. Maybe we won't have a 2-hour video watching me open up a can of paint. There we go. Shaking it up. And I'm going to pour about an equal amount of that stuff in there. I got about the same size of brush. Now I'm going to do something that might seem a little weird to you. I'm going to add some water into both of them, about the same amount, and I'm going to mix it. Rinse, mix. Now when you look at those two colors, those colors look like they're far away from each other in terms of the color wheel, or the color we're looking for. And so to make that kind of match where it's not too stark between one and the other, I'm going to go right into that light color, swirl it around a little bit. Don't wash your brush. Go into the second color. Don't wash your brush. Go back to the original color. And do this about 3 or 4 times. What that does is bring the value of those two colors closer together so that when you do one after the other on your painting, it doesn't look too stark. And so while it may look about the same color as we started, it's really not. So here's what I'm going to do now. I said I wasn't going to wet it down because I wanted that boiled linseed oil to soak in. Now I'm going to. And I keep hearing from some people that oil and water don't mix, but you know what? They do when you make them. They may not want to mix when they want to. We're going to come in here and wet every skin surface down with water. It's going to help it flow because what you don't want is harsh lines on the face. So the problem with this is we're going to get the neck wet, and then putting it in that hole for the neck on the bandana is a little bit tricky. All right, we got him wet. You can see that he's wet everywhere, almost still moist in some areas too. Keep doing that until you think you've got a good overall coating of water. And then I'm going to dip into the lighter colored first, and I'm going to cover the entire face. Lighter in some areas, meaning I don't want it a lot of heavy stuff, but I'm just going to cover that face. Eyes, nose, everything, behind the ears. You want to get this everywhere that you can see skin. And it starts to look like you're going, oh no, I don't want that color. Well, you do. Because again, that's that undercoating. It's that undercoating we're trying to get to. We're trying to get that one color all over the body, all over the head, face area. Don't forget to do under the chin, around the neck, and under the nose. we've watered this down quite a bit, so it's not the original value coming out of the tube. Okay, looks like skin. Now we're going to go in the darker areas, and I want to water this down a little bit more because I think it might be a little too thick. I'm going to go and I want to start sweeping it up into there. It's not going to go everywhere. It's going to go most places. So be sparing on how you put it in some places, and be very conscious about where you put it in others. But we're going to let these two colors mix on the head. The darker and the lighter. You want particularly more color out here on the cheeks. I like to put a little more color on the ears. It makes them look kind of red kind of ear. And then, while that's sitting there drying, soaking in, I want to come back. Let me get rid of some of these paints out of the way real quick. I'm going to come back with a touch of tomato red. And I'm going to take a little bit of tomato red out of that cap. See how much I can get out of there, if enough. Oh, that's plenty. In fact, that's more than I need. Okay, I want to water this down quite a bit. And if I slop a little bit of that original color in it, see how little of that color I'm going to get? But boy, that makes a big difference on, let's look at the back of the neck, for instance. See how that color gets down into that little darker color gets down in there, makes it look like veins. Looks like wrinkles in the skin. I'm going to add this color to places like the nose. Underneath the nose. I'm going to add it to the cheekbones. And the darker you want it, it's up to you, but you're just adding a little bit more color. Almost like this guy's got, you know, you look at somebody that you've been around a while, you don't see just one color on their face. They got lots of colors on their faces. And so you're just showing that. You're just showing the color. I don't know that there's any paint manufacturer out there who has come up with a really good way of approximating the color of skin. And so I'm going to go and get a little bit more out here on these ears. I want them down in there to make them look like they're ears with skin and skin color on them too. And now I'm going to go back and pick up more color, make that color just a little bit darker, and now I want to get down here in the corners. You know, anywhere you see a wrinkle, anywhere there's something up under, like up under the eyes, eyebrows, right around the eyes, get those bags done, up under the neck. A little bit too much there. You're trying to make this fella look like he's gonna leap off your carving table. So you see a little bit more color. I want to put a little more underneath the lip, not too much. You can always wash it off if you get too much there. And then I'm going to come back here with a real light coating of this red and just color them lips just a little bit more. I don't want a whole lot. I don't want it watered down. I don't want it running too much. But right there where those lips are, I want to give it just a little bit darker color. Just a little more red. Because you are more red around your lips. I think he's starting to look pretty good. You know what though? I want a little bit more of that red on the end of his nose. Kind of like he's been in enjoying the sauce a little bit more. Give him a little bit more right there. And if you put too much on there, you can always take it off. This is watercolor, acrylic, so you can take it off if you don't like it. And if it doesn't come off, paint over it. No big deal. But I painted up here under the eyelids too. Okay, we're going to hit him with a hairdryer, so watch the sound for a few seconds. Move this out a little bit so you can see. This is what he looks like. I may not have the best lighting in here. Eventually, someday I will, but right now we've got several different colors on his face because we want him to look like, you know, an old cowboy. And when you put him into the bandana, he starts to come alive. We're going to have his head turning this way because that's the way he's looking. And so this fella is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to hit the dryer in a few more seconds because the next step's got to be dry. All right, I'm now going to do those highlighted details that you see people talk about. That brown, what did I do with the brown I had? There it is. I want to take a fairly flexible brush, and I usually use one of these makeup brushes that I bought. See how flexible that brush is. I'm going to add a little bit of dark paint, and I'm going to take most of it off. And what I'm going to do is go over top of this gray hat. I hope I've got most of the paint off, because if not, I'm going to screw it up. Good, don't have enough on there. All we're doing is just adding, see that detail that pops out of there? We're just going to add a dark highlight, and then I'm going to come back in here in just a few seconds with the lighter one. I'm going to use this over all the hat. Make sure you get most of that off there, otherwise you'll be getting some ugly swatches across the painting you spent all that time on. See right there? We just want to give him a little bit of flavor to the hat. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I could have used a darker gray. It might have been a little bit different, but I'm just going to give some texture to this hat. And a little bit goes a long way. So you don't need to have a big glob of paint on there, but a little bit goes a long way. So can you see some of those details there? It's one of my favorite tools to use in adding details to my carvings. Because now we've got 2 layers. This is the 3rd layer of paint over that hat. Now, the other one I'm going to do the same thing, but with a lighter color. And so whether you use, I primarily use buttermilk, but you can use desert tan, you can use khaki tan, you can use a light gray. It depends on what you want. But I'm going to use this Americana. But first I want to color that hair, because he looks kind of like an old young fella. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does. But I'm going to take a little bit of that original gray that I had and do the same thing I just did. But I'm going to do it on hair. I'm going to wash this brush out really well. I'm going to dry it and make sure it's completely dry, because if there's water in there, this technique doesn't work. What it does is it spreads out the paint and you don't get those highlights you get. All right, once again, I'm going in here, getting paint. I don't know if you can see that paint there, but I want to go down to my paper, and I'm just going to get almost all of this off of there. You see, by the time I'm down here, I got very little paint. Let's check the back of the hair to see if that's going to work. I believe so. I believe it will, because we want to give him gray undertones on that hat, on that hair. Now, if you're worried about it being too big a brush, grab a smaller one. I bought this as a set of 3, and I think, oh, there's an even bigger one, and there's a tiny one in here somewhere, and a little one too. All these things do the same thing. So I'm going to do this one on the hair, everywhere I see hair. You got to be careful not to get it all over the face. But you're just making him, he's got brown undertones to his hair like he used to be a brunette. And now you're giving him a little bit of gray. And we'll go in a minute and we'll give him a little bit of white. Or buttermilk in this case. Okay? So I did that for the gray. I'm going to do the same thing for the hat, but I'm going to use that buttermilk. So the same thing, but now I've used that before. There's no paint up there, so I'll just squirt a little bit over into the well. Just about all I need right there, just a drop or two. And I'm going to grab the bigger one. It's more flexible, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting paint in there, and then I'm trying to get it all out. Okay. And when I come back over these highlights, some of them will disappear, but some of them will go up under where I want them to go. A little bit too much. If you get too much on there, just rub it off. And so now I'm going across the facets. This adds a layer of what I call dust. This is the fairy dust to what I'm doing to make the magic come out, if you want to call it that. It'd be arrogant to say my stuff is magic, but anyway, I'm just trying to get more layers of detail in here. More for somebody to look at and say, that's cool, that is really good. And even if somebody isn't a buyer, but an admirer, I'm okay with that. I don't have to sell everything. This isn't my primary form of income. I'm still working full time as of 2021. But I can, when I do a demo and showing somebody, especially when you get a new carver in and they say, yeah, I've always wanted to carve and now I want to carve cowboys. And it's nice to have, even if you haven't sold anything, it's nice to have something there for them to look at. You know, you got ideas for them to take into consideration and say, well, maybe I want to do it your way, maybe I want to do it my way, but they get interested in trying it their way by seeing your way. And once they see your way, they realize it can be done. It's one of the reasons I do these videos. I want to show those of you out there that are afraid to do it. Number one, it's just wood, and it's most of us are using basswood. And so basswood is a fairly inexpensive wood in terms of when you break it down to square foot. It's not that expensive. But I like using it for that reason. See those little details we've added on this whole head? All those little highlights, all that dry brushing, all that stuff we wanted in there to make his hat look like it wasn't brand new. It didn't just come off the shelf. Now, I'm going to go back to the small one, and I want just a little bit, because I'm going to bring out the color of his hair. I'm going to show him to be one of those wise old fellas in the bunkhouse. Too much. I just want to give him the illusion, off the camera, doggone it, sorry. Just giving him the illusion of that gray to his hair. Okay. Get just a little bit more on there. Because we've got eyebrows. Be careful with the eyebrows because you can easily get it all over there, up under that hat brim. You'll see it more on the back when we get back to the back of the hair. Okay, here we go. Go across the cuts. Don't try to undercut everything. Go across the cuts, and it'll leave the gray and the brown that you've already put on there. Gray, the brown, and now the little bit of white in there. I like it. I really like it. All right, we got a couple of things left, and then we're done with this fella. I'm going to color his eyes, and I'm going to use buttermilk. I know most people use white for the eyes. I like to use buttermilk because I don't like stark white for my carvings. I'm not telling anybody how to do it. I appreciate how everybody else does it, and I like how they do it. But for me and mine, I'm going to do it this way. I got a set of real small brushes that I bought some time ago. They've got real little bitty ones. I think the size is 10/0, 5/0, 0, and 1. Don't ask me which one is a 0 and 1 and which one's a 5/0, but I guess sorry. I hadn't opened that nut before. 10/0, 5/0, 3/0, and 0. That one still had the little thing in it to keep you from getting into it. I'm going to use a really, really tiny brush. This one is the Artist Loft 10/0. I'm not sure if they make them any smaller than that, but you can see how little that brush is. There's not much to it, which is good because I'm applying straight paint. And in these eyes, you know what I'm going to do before I do that? I'm going to dry it. I'm going to dry everything here because I don't want paint running. So give me a few seconds. Alrighty then. There we go. We're going to get right up in that. Steady hand, good eyesight. It's okay if you need to use cheaters. I'm just about to the point where I'm going to have to use cheaters from now on when I get the little stuff like this. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing, but I'm covering up the eyeball, trying not to slop it everywhere, trying to stay within the lines. This is where practice as a kid comes in handy, where you had to color inside the lines. Oop. Splashed a little on his hat. Right in here, this part of the carving is the painting part where you're going to use the hairbrush quite a bit. I know a lot of people will color the eye black, especially down in the corners, and then cover it over with white, and then do black and a color and a black. And I always talk about details and layers. And in this one, what I'm trying to do is trying to eliminate a lot of layers because it's so small in there that the more I touch it, the more I play with it, the more likely it is I'm going to screw it up. So I'm just going to try to get in there with this color, dark, and a color of the paint. So let me dry this. When painting eyes, what we do not want is to paint wet on wet. To me, that whenever I've done that, I've always looked sloppy. So figure out what color you want. I'm gonna go to a kind of a raw sienna color, but first I'm gonna color a little black in there. No. So I want to take a brush and I want to use soft black. Soft black is almost a brown. It's not quite a stark black because you get another black like lamp black, and it's much darker. I don't know if you can see the differences in those two colors right there. But lamp black is a little bit shinier black to me. All right, I know he's going to be looking this way, so that's the way I'm going to paint. So a little bit of paint out of the well, and I'm going to put a dot and another dot. And it always makes me look freaky because that's just a freaky looking look. So I'm going to come in, and I know he's going to be primarily looking to the left and up. So that's where I'm going to try to keep my eyeball painted. So he's kind of looking up and to the left, my left, his right. And I'm going to make that thing just a little bit bigger. This is where I almost pass out because I hold my breath while I'm doing it. So I'm trying to paint, and it's sometimes a trouble to get in here and make the paints you want. But anyway, make it just a little bit bigger. There we go. No, we don't. More over here. The good thing is if you're careful, you can dry it out and paint over it. That's the beauty of this. Is if I screw it up, well, heck, I can even carve it off if I needed to, get it completely dry, go back and carve it off, come back where you need to go. But if you're real worried about eyes, practice makes better. It won't make you perfect. I don't know anything that's perfect. Certainly not me, but practice makes it better. Okay, you got an idea of where I'm going with that? I want to dry that before I do anything to it, because it'll run if I don't. I've dropped him so many times, I'm surprised it's not broken. Okay, I like this. I'm going to move paint out of the way before I spill it. I like this raw sienna for eyes. And so I'm just going to get a little bit of dip out of there. I don't need much, but I want to just leave a thin line of black around the outside edge. So I got a little bit of paint. If you're worried about it being too much, come on here and just twirl your brush. And I'm just going to paint that eye. It ain't got enough water in it at all, does it? Need a little bit. Got to get it to flow. Yeah. That's not thick enough either. So that black rim around the eye doesn't need to be very wide. It needs to be about 1 millimeter wide. So I don't need much, but I want to leave that eye with a little bit of dark around it. Trying not to talk, because when I talk, I'm breathing. When I'm breathing, my hands start to get a little nervous. Again, I don't need much color in there. Dry it again. Another dab of black right in the middle. Is that the iris? Is that what they call that? I know some carvers think you don't need to go to this detail, but again, like I say, it's the detail that really makes people stand up and look at it. Now, you have a tendency on these to make a mistake, and they end up looking like big doll eyes. That's one of the reasons I don't do a lot of eyelashes on my carvings. I don't want them to look like dolls, and I don't know how much that's going to add to the overall effect I'm looking at. But anyway, okay, hit it again with the dryer. Bear me a second. And the last thing I want to do on those eyes is give it a highlight. So grab a white, some kind of white, whatever white you got, and I'm going to use a stylus. The stylus here, I don't even know, they come in a pack of 3 of them at the art store. I want to dip it right at the end of that stylus, And actually I slopped it all over the place. I only want it at the end, so I got down in there where I didn't need to get. Only want it at the end. And I'm just going to make a dot right where the edge of the eye is. And I think he looks pretty good. Now, let me see if I can find what I'm thinking about, because usually when I do these guys, when it dries, a lot of these colors are going to kind of blend together. You can see a little more red on the face, on the mouth, a little red here and left. I like to hit it with something. Give me a second. Let me see if I can find what I'm talking about, because I've got a. And I want to embarrass myself by not being able to find what I'm talking about. I have some of these pastel colors. I started out with this one years ago, and I've since used the devil out of it. You can see it's broken all over the place down here. Use the little pastels. What I like to do, this is one that Cleve taught me. And I like to take a stiff brush. This is a fairly stiff bristle brush. And since that stuff kind of fell apart on me, I found some stuff at Blick Art, different colors, that I like to use. I'm going to use this darker one over here. So what I do is it's almost like, I say I'm going to use it, and I don't think I've opened that one yet, and I'm going to embarrass myself here. There, we'll use this one, no big deal. I'm going to get in there, see how that powderizes? Doesn't take much to powderize. I want to get it in there, and I'm going to use it as a dry brush over top of my painting. But I got to get most of that off of there. And then I'm going to test it on the ears. Ears is the easiest one to do. When I go across it, blow off that extra dust, rub it in if you need to. It gives it a little bit of different dimension. Brings out some of those little highlights that weren't brought out when you did it earlier. Okay, you really see it right here. Watch. When I said we're going to make him like he's been drinking a little bit, there he is. Put some on the cheeks like we're applying some kind of makeup. I'm going to put it up under his neck. Give him that true redneck looking color. You can always wipe it off again. And because it's powder, if you get too much on in a spot like that, you can come back here with a wet rag. And you can wipe some of that off. So I got this towel right here. It's got a little water in it. And I'm going to wipe it off with and getting the dry in. Come here. There we go. But be real careful with this stuff, because it don't take much to give you the effect you want. If you really want it, you could even dab it in the eyes to make him look like he's kind of roomy. As in, what are they called? Roomy eyes. But you get the idea of what I'm talking about. This is, I bought it from Blick Art. I'm sure you can get it somewhere else. It's Pan Steel Artist Pastels. Extra suave, ultra soft, ultra tender, extra WEICH, whatever the heck that is. Anyway, I like it. And I like the effect it has on faces. It gives him a little bit. If you put too much on there, you can always come back in here, wipe some of it off, blend it a little bit more like the ladies do with their makeup. But I like it because it makes him there. Okay. We are at 59 minutes. And I think I'm going to end this one because we want to finish this, and then I'll show you how I finish it all. So we'll end this video now. Thanks for staying with me. Talk to you in the next video.